Hey guys, tonight we're talking about medieval products. Things that were invented with confidence, failed immediately, annoyed everyone involved, and somehow survived long enough for us to still be using them. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Medieval toothpaste was not designed to care for teeth. It was designed to intimidate them. The idea was noble. Clean your mouth, avoid rot, appear vaguely civilized. The execution, however, suggested medieval people were conducting a long-term experiment to see how much pain a human could tolerate before simply giving up on smiling. The ingredients alone read like a medieval prank. Crushed animal bones, burnt shells, wood ash, salt, charcoal, occasionally powdered brick, because when your dental plan is already unhinged, why not commit fully? These substances were mixed into gritty powders or pastes and rubbed directly onto teeth using fingers, cloth, or what can only be described as medieval optimism. This did technically remove plaque. It also removed enamel, dignity, and any joy associated with having a mouth. Brushing was not refreshing. It was an event. People did not freshen up. They braced themselves. The sensation has been described by historians as unpleasant, abrasive, and deeply regrettable, like chewing sand while someone whispers encouragement. And medieval people noticed. They were not fools. They noticed their teeth becoming sensitive. They noticed bleeding. They noticed that drinking anything remotely warm or cold now felt like a personal attack. Many responded logically by stopping entirely. Others continued brushing out of fear that not brushing would somehow be worse, which is a very medieval approach to problem solving. Here is the real failure. Toothpaste did not significantly improve dental outcomes. Teeth still rotted. Gums still receded. Infections still happened. The product hurt, delivered minimal results, and inspired zero enthusiasm. In modern terms, it would have been discontinued after a week and recalled for emotional damage. And yet, humanity refused to let it die. Instead of abandoning toothpaste, we refined it. We softened the abrasives. We added mint so it felt like progress. We gave it reassuring names like gentle, advanced, and recommended by dentists, even though the basic principle remains unchanged. Scrape your teeth daily and hope science has improved things enough to make it survivable. Even today, toothpaste still works by abrasion. It just smiles politely while doing it. So when you brush your teeth and wince at that one sensitive spot, remember, this is not a flaw. This is tradition. You are participating in a medieval product that failed immediately, annoyed everyone involved, and somehow became mandatory. History did not fix toothpaste. It just made it taste like mint and lie about it. Medieval soap was not created to pamper the skin. It was created to win a fight against dirt. And if your skin happened to lose that fight, that was considered acceptable collateral damage. Soap in the Middle Ages was typically made from animal fat mixed with lye, a substance so aggressive it can dissolve organic matter, including the illusion that bathing should feel pleasant. This mixture technically cleaned the body, in the same way that sanding a table technically cleans it. Yes, the surface becomes free of grime, but also free of its original texture, finish, and happiness. Using medieval soap was an experience. It burned. It dried the skin to the point where cracking was not a risk, but an expectation. Hair washed with it often became brittle, straw-like, or simply left the building altogether. Baldness was not uncommon, and no one was sure whether to blame age, stress, or the soap actively trying to erase them. And yet, people kept using it. Why? Because the alternative was smelling like medieval life, which included livestock, smoke, sweat, and existential dread. Soap may have hurt, but it hurt less than social exile. Cleanliness was not about comfort, it was about survival and reputation. If you smelled too bad, people assumed you were sick, cursed, or morally questionable. Here is where soap truly failed. It was inconsistent. Some batches cleaned reasonably well. Others caused rashes, chemical burns, or skin reactions that would have made modern dermatologists faint. There was no quality control, no testing, no warning labels, just a merchant saying, "Trust me," which in medieval times meant absolutely nothing. And yet, once again, humanity refused to let the idea die. Instead of admitting that soap was unpleasant and poorly designed, people refined it. They adjusted the fat, they softened the lye, they added herbs. Eventually, centuries later, soap became something you might actually enjoy using, but the core idea remained untouched. Rub fat on your body, hope it removes dirt, and accept mild suffering as part of the process. Even today, soap still dries skin. It still irritates. It still requires moisturizing products to undo what it just did. We have simply normalized this cycle and added pleasant scents to distract ourselves. So the next time your hands feel dry after washing them, remember, this is not a flaw. This is legacy. You are using a medieval product that failed its original users, annoyed them deeply, and somehow survived unchanged in spirit. Soap did not get better. We just got used to it. Early eyeglasses were not designed with comfort, convenience, or human anatomy in mind. They were designed with one simple goal: make letters slightly less blurry and let the wearer figure out the rest. Everything beyond that was apparently considered optional. The first medieval spectacles appeared around the late Middle Ages, and they failed almost immediately in every category except one. They technically worked. These early glasses were heavy, awkward, and balanced directly on the nose with the confidence of an object that wanted to fall off. There were no arms to hook over the ears, no adjustable parts, just two lenses connected by hope and friction. If you moved your head too quickly, the glasses slid off. If you bent over, they fell. If you sneezed, they abandoned you. Reading while wearing medieval eyeglasses required monk-like discipline. You had to sit perfectly upright, hold your book at the correct angle, and resist the urge to exist too energetically. Any sudden movement could send your lenses tumbling into the dirt, where they would be immediately stepped on by someone who did not care about your vision journey. And let us be clear, people hated them. Eyeglasses were uncomfortable, socially awkward, and openly mocked. Some believed they were unnatural, others claimed they weakened the eyes. A few suspected they were borderline witchcraft. Nothing says cutting-edge technology like being accused of sorcery because you want to read without squinting. They also barely worked. Early lenses corrected only one specific problem, usually farsightedness, and did so imperfectly. If your vision issue was slightly different, congratulations. These glasses were decorative. You could see a little better, but not enough to justify the inconvenience, judgment, and constant fear of dropping them. And yet, humanity refused to abandon the idea. Instead of admitting eyeglasses were a failure, people doubled down. They added frames. They added arms. They refined lenses. They kept the same basic concept and dragged it forward through centuries of discomfort. Even now, glasses slip, pinch, fog up, scratch, and break at the worst possible moment. We complain constantly. We still wear them. Eyeglasses are the perfect medieval failure product. People disliked them from the beginning. They were uncomfortable, unreliable, and socially risky. But they solved just enough of a problem that no one could justify throwing them away. So when your glasses slide down your nose or fog up the moment you step outside, remember, this is not bad design. This is tradition. Medieval alarm clocks were invented for people who hated sleeping too long, but were apparently fine with mild terror. These devices were not designed to wake you gently. They were designed to interrupt your existence with just enough chaos to force consciousness. Early alarm mechanisms came in many deeply questionable forms. Some used weights that slowly descended overnight until they triggered a bell. Others involved candles marked with nails or metal balls that, once the wax burned down, would drop onto a plate with a dramatic clatter. The idea was simple. Noise equals waking. Precision was optional. Safety was negotiable. Accuracy was optimistic. Medieval alarm clocks did not care what time it actually was. They cared only that something happened eventually. If you needed to wake before dawn, you might wake before midnight, or not at all, or during a small house fire. It was a flexible system, and people hated them. Imagine trusting your entire workday, prayer schedule, or survival routine to a candle slowly burning in a drafty room. If the flame flickered wrong, congratulations. You are now late. If the wax burned too fast, you woke up early and stared into the darkness, questioning every life choice that led you here. Some alarms were so loud and violent that they startled entire households awake, including people who had absolutely nothing scheduled that morning. Medieval mornings were not private affairs. One person's alarm was everyone's problem. And yet, despite the inconvenience, danger, and sheer unreliability, the concept refused to die. Instead of saying, perhaps humans were not meant to be shocked awake by collapsing objects, people doubled down. They refined the idea. They added gears, springs, bells, eventually electricity. Now we use phones that scream at us every morning like emotionally distant medieval bells with Wi-Fi, and we still hate them. No one enjoys alarm clocks. We dread them. We negotiate with them. We hit snooze like it is a legally binding contract. Entire industries exist to make alarms gentler, softer, or more natural, which is humanity quietly admitting that the original idea was a mistake. But the core concept remains unchanged. Artificial noise forces wakefulness. Wakefulness leads to productivity. Productivity justifies suffering. Medieval alarm clocks failed at comfort, accuracy, and user satisfaction. They succeeded only in one thing: making sure people woke up against their will. That single success was apparently enough to carry the product through centuries. So tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off and you feel instant resentment, remember, this is not modern inconvenience. This is medieval heritage ringing in your ears. Medieval candles were not romantic. They were not cozy. They were not atmospheric. They were barely functional sticks of disappointment that happened to be on fire. Most medieval candles were made from animal tallow, rendered fat taken from cows or sheep. This meant they smelled faintly of livestock, smoked aggressively, and dripped molten grease everywhere like they were actively trying to ruin your furniture. Beeswax candles existed, but those were expensive and mostly reserved for churches, nobles, or people who wanted to flex their wealth through illumination. Lighting a candle did not create a soft glow. It created a small, flickering argument between flame, smoke, and gravity. Tallow candles burned unevenly, bent under their own heat, and showered hot wax onto tables, floors, hands, and occasionally faces. People did not relax by candlelight. They monitored it nervously. The light itself was underwhelming. One candle barely illuminated a room. 2 candles meant luxury. 3 candles meant you were either wealthy or doing something suspicious. Reading by candlelight was difficult, eye-straining, and often accompanied by coughing as smoke gathered near the ceiling like an unwanted house guest. And yet, candles were everywhere. Why? Because there was no alternative. Oil lamps required oil. Torches were dangerous indoors. Candles, as awful as they were portable, controllable, and only mildly catastrophic. So people tolerated them, complained constantly, and kept using them. Candles failed at efficiency. They failed at cleanliness. They failed at comfort. They failed at safety. Medieval records mention fires caused by candles with alarming frequency, usually followed by phrases like tragic accident and everything burned down. And still, humanity refused to let them go. Instead of abandoning candles, we refined them. We improved wicks. We cleaned wax. We reduced smoke. And then, centuries later, something strange happened. We started buying them voluntarily. We labeled them relaxing. We scented them. We lit them during baths and called it self-care, completely forgetting that medieval people would have associated candlelight with sore eyes and the constant fear of house fires. Candles are the perfect medieval failure product. They never worked particularly well. They annoyed everyone. They were dangerous, messy, and inefficient. But they survived. So the next time you light a candle and sigh contentedly, remember, you are enjoying a product that once smelled like a barn, burned down houses, and existed purely because people had no better option. History did not improve candles. It just convinced us to like them. Medieval mattresses were not designed for rest. They were designed for lying down, which medieval people apparently considered good enough. Comfort was not a design goal. Comfort was a rumour. Most medieval mattresses were large fabric sacks stuffed with straw, hay, dried leaves, or whatever plant matter had not already been eaten by livestock. If you were wealthy, you upgraded to feathers, which sounds luxurious until you realise those feathers flattened within days and stabbed you repeatedly through thin cloth like tiny judgmental needles. Sleeping on a medieval mattress was less restful slumber and more negotiation with gravity. The stuffing shifted constantly. You lay down comfortable, woke up partially on the floor, and spent the night adjusting like a rotisserie chicken that had regrets. Straw was especially unforgiving. Broken stalks poked through fabric, scratched skin, and occasionally drew blood. Insects loved it. Rodents moved in. Mold settled quietly. If your mattress started smelling strange, congratulations. Something had probably moved in permanently. And medieval people knew this. They complained endlessly. Writings from the period describe beds as uncomfortable, itchy, and unreliable. Mattresses flattened quickly and required constant refilling, which meant dragging in fresh straw and repeating the process like a seasonal curse. Here is where the product truly failed. Mattresses did not improve sleep quality. People woke up sore, stiff, and tired. Back pain was common. Good rest remained elusive. In modern terms, medieval mattresses had terrible customer satisfaction and zero quality control. And yet, humanity refused to abandon the idea. Instead of questioning whether sleeping on sacks of plant matter was wise, people doubled down. They improved the fabric. They experimented with stuffing. They layered mattresses. Eventually, centuries later, we arrived at foam, springs, and memory materials that still somehow fail to satisfy everyone. We still complain about mattresses. Too soft, too firm, too hot, too expensive. Somehow, after 800 years, we are still arguing about how to sleep comfortably. The medieval mattress failed immediately. It was uncomfortable, unhygienic, and exhausting. But the core idea, stuffing something soft into a sack and lying on it, was never questioned. So when you wake up sore and blame your mattress, remember, this is not modern inconvenience. This is medieval design philosophy, alive and well in your bedroom. Medieval pillows were not designed for comfort. They were designed to exist near your head and occasionally remind you that comfort was not a medieval priority. The idea of a soft, supportive cushion cradling your neck would have sounded suspiciously luxurious, possibly sinful, and almost certainly unnecessary. Early pillows were often stuffed with straw, rags, or rough feathers, and sewn into stiff fabric sacks that flattened almost immediately. Some were so firm they bordered on architectural features. Others were lumpy enough to qualify as terrain. Either way, waking up refreshed was not part of the experience. And if you were poor, you might not have had a pillow at all. You used folded clothing, a wooden block, or your arm. If you were wealthy, congratulations. You had a pillow that still hurt, just with better stitching. Comfort did not scale with income. It merely changed textures. In some regions, pillows were intentionally hard. The logic was that softness encouraged laziness, vanity, or spinal misalignment, depending on who you asked. There was also a belief that soft pillows caused moral weakness, which is a bold claim for an object that barely supported your head in the first place. Pillows also failed hygienically. They absorbed sweat, oils, drool, and whatever insects decided to move in. Washing them was rare. Drying them properly was even rarer. Over time, pillows developed personalities, none of them pleasant. If your pillow smelled odd, That was normal. Everything smelled odd. Despite all this, medieval people kept pillows. Not because they worked well, but because the idea of something under the head was hard to abandon. The product failed at softness, failed at cleanliness, and failed at durability, but it survived as a concept. Fast forward to today, and we are still arguing about pillows. Memory foam versus down, firm versus soft, cooling versus supportive. Entire industries exist to fix a problem medieval people accepted without complaint, waking up uncomfortable and pretending it was fine. Even now, pillows flatten, overheat, trap moisture, and need constant replacement. We complain, but we do not stop using them. We simply buy more, hoping the next one will finally solve what the last 10 could not. Pillows are a medieval failure that became tradition. They never worked perfectly. They annoyed everyone, and somehow they are still essential. So when you flip your pillow to the cool side tonight and feel brief relief, remember, you are participating in centuries of disappointment, just better marketed. Buttons were not invented to make life easier. They were invented to make clothing more annoying while pretending to be sophisticated. Before buttons, medieval people used ties, pins, and laces. Simple systems that worked quickly and allowed you to escape your clothes without a prolonged struggle. Buttons changed all of that. Early buttons appeared in the Middle Ages as decorative status symbols, not functional fasteners. They were small, fiddly, and proudly inefficient. Instead of securing garments quickly, they demanded time, precision, and patience. 3 things medieval life was already running dangerously low on. Buttoning a tunic could take several minutes. Undoing it took even longer. Cold fingers made the process feel like a test of personal worth. Drop a button, and it vanished into the straw-covered floor forever, joining a lost civilization of other tiny objects sacrificed to inconvenience. And yet, buttons spread. Why? Because they looked refined. Buttons suggested wealth, tailoring, and leisure. The kind of leisure required to stand still while someone else fastened you into your outfit like a human parcel. The more buttons you had, the more it signaled that you were important enough to waste time. Functionally, buttons failed. They popped off. They broke. They loosened. They offered no flexibility if your weight changed, which medieval diets were famously unpredictable about. Laces adjusted, pins adapted, buttons judged silently. Buttons also made laundry worse. Washing garments with buttons risked damage, tangling, or breakage. Repairing them required skill, thread, and eyesight. All things medieval peasants did not have in abundance. Despite this, humanity doubled down. Instead of admitting that buttons were inferior to faster systems, we embraced them. We added more buttons, smaller buttons, decorative buttons that did absolutely nothing. Even today, clothing includes buttons that exist purely to look busy while contributing nothing to function. We still struggle with them. We still lose them. We still get annoyed when one pops off in public. Buttons are the perfect medieval failure product. Slow, unnecessary, fragile, and irritating, yet socially powerful enough to survive unchanged in principle for centuries. So the next time you button a shirt and feel that tiny flicker of frustration, remember, this is not poor modern design. This is medieval fashion, winning an argument it never deserved to win. Medieval public toilets were not designed for hygiene. They were designed for containment, and even that goal was approached with alarming optimism. The basic idea was simple. Designate a hole, convince people to aim for it, and trust gravity to solve the rest. Science was not invited to this meeting. Most medieval public toilets were long wooden benches, with multiple holes cut into them, positioned over pits, rivers, or flowing water if someone was feeling ambitious. There were no dividers, no privacy, no personal space. Using the toilet was a communal activity, whether you wanted it to be or not. Conversation happened, eye contact happened, regret happened. Cleanliness was theoretical. These toilets were rarely cleaned, frequently overflowing, and always aromatic. The smell was not unpleasant. It was structural. It clung to buildings. It drifted through streets. It announced itself long before you arrived, giving you time to reconsider your life choices. Disease spread easily, but medieval people did not connect toilets with illness in any meaningful way. If you got sick, that was God, fate, or bad air. Not the whole everyone was using repeatedly all day. The concept failed spectacularly at sanitation, health, and dignity. And yet, the idea survived. Instead of abandoning shared toilet spaces, humanity kept them. We refined the pits, added water, added pipes, added flushing, added signs asking people to wash their hands, because apparently that still needed clarification centuries later. Modern public bathrooms are objectively better, and yet they still inspire discomfort, anxiety, and avoidance. We still hesitate before entering. We still judge cleanliness instantly. We still avoid touching surfaces whenever possible. The medieval experience lives on emotionally, if not structurally. Public toilets have never been loved. They have always been tolerated. They fail at comfort. They fail at privacy. They fail at peace of mind. And yet they are unavoidable, because the alternative is far worse. Medieval public toilets were a failure because they solved one problem while creating several new ones. They removed waste from sight, but not from life. They gathered people together at their most vulnerable moment and called it infrastructure. So the next time you enter a public restroom and feel a wave of hesitation, remember, this discomfort is not modern, it is inherited. You are participating in a medieval solution that barely worked then and only slightly works now. History did not fix public toilets. It just added doors and hoped you would not think too hard about it. Medieval umbrellas were not designed to protect you from the weather. They were designed to make a philosophical statement. Specifically, I am trying something and I regret it already. Early umbrellas were heavy, awkward, and deeply offended by wind. They were often made with wooden frames, stiff fabric, and absolutely no understanding of aerodynamics. Opening one in a breeze was less an act of protection and more an invitation to wrestle with nature in public. They barely worked. Rain still found its way in from the sides. Wind flipped them inside out long before that was a recognized engineering flaw. And when they broke, which they did enthusiastically, they broke spectacularly, snapping ribs and collapsing like disappointed spiders. Socially, umbrellas were a disaster. Carrying one marked you as strange, pretentious, or suspiciously foreign. Many people believed umbrellas were unmanly, impractical, or an insult to God's weather decisions. If it was raining, you were expected to accept it. Shielding yourself was viewed as soft behavior. Despite this, umbrellas persisted. Why? Because on a calm day, in a gentle drizzle, standing perfectly still, they sort of worked. And humanity has always been willing to tolerate 90% failure if something works 10% of the time and looks vaguely sophisticated while doing it. Umbrellas also failed at portability. They were large, rigid, and inconvenient to carry when not in use, which was most of the time. People dragged them around like uncomfortable walking sticks, bumping into others and apologizing constantly. And yet, instead of abandoning the idea, we refined it. We added collapsible frames. We lightened materials. We improved fabric. We pretended this solved the core issue, even though modern umbrellas still invert, break, and abandon you the moment weather becomes emotionally intense. We still lose them. We still forget them. We still buy cheap ones knowing they will die within weeks. Umbrellas are a medieval failure product that survived on pure optimism. They never fully solved the problem they were designed for. They simply offered the illusion of control over rain, an illusion humans find deeply comforting. So the next time your umbrella turns inside out in public while you quietly fight it back into shape, remember, this is not poor modern engineering. This is medieval stubbornness unfolding above your head. Medieval locks were not designed to stop criminals. They were designed to make honest people feel optimistic. The basic idea was comforting. Place a piece of metal between your belongings and the rest of the world, and sleep better at night. The reality, unfortunately, was far less reassuring. Early medieval locks were bulky, inconsistent, and surprisingly easy to defeat if you had time, patience, or a vaguely shaped piece of metal. Keys were large, awkward, and looked like something you would use to summon a ghost. Losing one was a disaster, replacing one was worse, and trusting one required faith bordering on delusion. Locks failed constantly. They jammed. They rusted. They broke in cold weather. Some opened if you shook them aggressively, which meant even thieves with no skill could succeed through enthusiasm alone. Others worked only if you held the key at exactly the right angle while whispering encouragement. Security was mostly symbolic. A locked chest did not say, "This is impossible to steal." It said, "Please steal something else first." And medieval thieves understood this perfectly. Many did not bother picking locks. They simply broke the container, because the lock itself was often stronger in concept than in construction. And yet, people loved locks. Why? Because they offered psychological comfort. Even a bad lock feels better than no lock. It tells you that you tried, that you cared, that you participated in the illusion of control over your possessions. Instead of abandoning locks when they clearly failed, medieval people kept improving them. They added complexity, wards, tumblers, traps. Each new version promised security and delivered mild inconvenience, and we kept the idea alive. Even today, locks fail. Keys snap, doors jam, passwords get forgotten, security systems get bypassed. We still rely on tiny mechanisms to protect everything we own, and we still feel betrayed when they fail us. Locks are a perfect medieval failure product. They never fully stopped theft. They complicated access. They required constant maintenance. And they survived because humans crave the comfort of believing their stuff is safe. So the next time you lock a door and still feel the urge to double-check it, remember, this anxiety is not modern. It is medieval reassurance doing its very best. Medieval makeup was not designed to enhance beauty. It was designed to win a staring contest with death and convince society you were healthy enough to survive the week. Pale skin was fashionable because it suggested you did not work outside, did not sweat, and were not currently being crushed by peasant labour. The solution was simple. Paint your face white and hope no one asked too many questions. The most popular ingredient was lead. Yes, actual lead. Ground into powders and applied generously to the face, it created the desired ghostly pallor while slowly poisoning the wearer. Skin damage, hair loss, tooth decay, and neurological problems followed. Medieval people noticed the side effects. They just decided beauty was worth it. Rouge was no better. Made from crushed insects, toxic minerals, or plants that absolutely should not have been rubbed on skin, it irritated faces and caused rashes. Lips cracked, cheeks burned. But the colour looked fashionable for a few hours, and that was apparently enough. Makeup failed completely at safety. It failed at skincare. It failed at long-term health. In modern terms, this product would have been recalled immediately and banned by every regulatory body on Earth. And yet, humanity refused to stop. Instead of abandoning makeup when it actively harmed users, people refined it. They removed the worst poisons. They replaced them with slightly less poisonous substances. Eventually, we reached a point where makeup mostly does not kill you, which is a low but impressive bar. Even now, makeup still irritates skin. It clogs pores, it causes breakouts, it requires entire removal routines to undo the damage it just did. We apply products in the morning and spend the evening repairing the consequences, just like medieval users did, only now with better lighting and more mirrors. Makeup is a medieval failure product because everyone knew it was bad. They saw the damage, they experienced the pain, they complained, and they kept using it anyway because social pressure mattered more than comfort or health. So the next time your skin reacts badly to a cosmetic product and you sigh in resignation, remember, this is not modern inconvenience. This is medieval beauty standards refusing to die. Medieval medical bandages were not designed to heal wounds. They were designed to make everyone feel like something was being done, which in medieval medicine counted as success. The basic idea was simple. If something is bleeding, wrap it. With what? Whatever cloth was nearby. Old linen, rags, torn clothing. Sometimes bandages were reused because laundry was difficult and optimism was strong. Cleanliness was not a requirement. Faith was. These bandages trapped dirt, moisture and bacteria with impressive efficiency. Instead of protecting wounds, they created warm, enclosed environments where infections could thrive happily. If a wound became red, swollen, or started smelling strange, that was considered a normal stage of healing, or a sign that God was deeply involved. Medieval people noticed that wounds often worsened after being bandaged. They noticed fever, pain, and spreading infection. They noticed limbs turning colours that limbs should not turn. And yet the practice continued. Why? Because doing nothing felt worse. Bandaging gave structure to care. It gave patients hope. It gave healers the appearance of competence. Removing a bandage felt irresponsible, even if keeping it on was slowly destroying the patient. And here is where the product truly failed. Bandages were often paired with substances that made things worse. Honey, herbs, wine, animal fat, sometimes helpful, sometimes disastrous. There was no way to tell. Medical outcomes were treated like surprise endings. In modern terms, medieval bandages had catastrophic side effects and wildly inconsistent results. They failed at sanitation. They failed at healing. They failed at preventing infection. But they succeeded at one crucial thing: ritual. Instead of abandoning bandages, humanity refined them. We cleaned the cloth, sterilized it, improved materials. But the core medieval idea remains untouched. Wrap the wound and trust the process. Even now, bandages trap moisture. They irritate skin. They occasionally cause infection if left too long. We still argue about whether to let a wound breathe or keep it covered, a debate medieval people were unknowingly having without the vocabulary. So the next time you peel off a bandage and wince at what you see underneath, remember, this discomfort is not modern. It is medieval medicine, doing its best and failing forward. Medieval footwear was not designed for comfort. It was designed to technically exist between your foot and the ground, and even that goal was approached with cautious optimism. Shoes were stiff, thin, and unforgiving. Walking all day meant pain was not a possibility. It was a feature. To solve this, medieval people invented insoles. And by invented, I mean they stuffed things into their shoes and hoped for mercy. Straw, cloth scraps, moss, hay, whatever was nearby and vaguely soft was pushed inside. This padding shifted constantly, bunched up, flattened within hours, and smelled like it had its own opinions. At first it felt better, briefly. Then the stuffing migrated. One step later, all the cushioning was under your toes. 2 steps later, it vanished entirely. By midday, you were walking on bare leather again, except now your shoe also contained damp organic matter, slowly becoming a science experiment. Insoles failed at durability. They failed at stability. They failed at hygiene. Wet straw inside a shoe did not dry quickly. It rotted. It attracted insects. If you removed it at the end of the day, you were greeted by a smell that suggested your foot had lived a full, independent life. And medieval people knew this. They complained. They replaced stuffing constantly. They accepted that walking hurt and that foot comfort was a modern fantasy. Yet instead of abandoning insoles, they kept them, because even temporary relief was better than none. This is where the failure becomes impressive. Instead of questioning whether stuffing plants into shoes was a flawed concept, humanity refined it. We replaced straw with felt, felt with cork, cork with foam, foam with gel, and somehow, after centuries of innovation, people still complain about insoles not working properly. Too soft, too firm, too thin, too bulky. Sound familiar? Modern insoles still flatten. They still shift. They still smell. We still remove them occasionally and question our life choices. The materials changed, but the experience did not. Footwear insoles are a medieval failure product that survived through pure desperation. They never fully solved the problem they were created for. They simply made walking slightly less miserable for a short period of time, which, in medieval logic, counted as success. So the next time your feet ache and you consider buying new insoles, remember, this disappointment is ancient. You are walking in medieval footsteps, literally and emotionally. Medieval paperwork was not designed to make life easier. It was designed to exist, multiply, and slowly drain the will of everyone involved. The moment medieval societies discovered paper records, they immediately asked the most dangerous question in human history. What if we wrote this down? Again. Charters, permits, tax records, guild memberships, land deeds, church documents, everything required paper. And not just one copy, multiple copies, stored in different places, written by hand, slowly, painfully, often incorrectly. The process failed at efficiency immediately. Copying documents took hours, days, sometimes weeks. Mistakes were common, corrections were messy. Entire disputes erupted over spelling errors or smudged ink. If a document was lost, burned, stolen, or eaten by rodents, congratulations. History had just reset your legal existence. And medieval people hated it. Records from the period are filled with complaints about clerks, delays, confusing language, and endless repetition. People travelled long distances only to be told they were missing a document they had never been informed existed. Sound familiar? Good. That means the system is working exactly as intended. Paper bureaucracy failed because it created more problems than it solved. It slowed decisions. It centralized power. It favored those who could read, write, and afford scribes. For everyone else, paperwork was a maze designed to exhaust you into compliance. And yet, humanity clung to it like a bad habit. Instead of simplifying systems, medieval societies expanded them. More forms, more seals, more signatures, more layers of approval. Every problem became a paperwork problem, and paperwork became the problem itself. Fast forward to today, and nothing has changed except the medium. We still fill out forms. We still repeat information. We still submit documents only to be told they are missing one tiny detail. Paper became digital, but the frustration stayed beautifully intact. We still joke about bureaucracy. We still suffer through it. We still accept it as unavoidable. Paper bureaucracy is the ultimate medieval failure product because it never worked smoothly, never pleased users, and never delivered clarity. Yet it survived because institutions loved it. It created order for those in charge and confusion for everyone else. So the next time you fill out a form that asks for the same information 3 times and then rejects it anyway, remember, this is not modern inefficiency. This is medieval administration, alive, well, and still wasting your time. Mary Shelley was born into a household where ideas mattered more than comfort, reputation, or safety. From the moment she entered the world in 1797, her life was shaped by intellect, controversy, and loss. She was the daughter of 2 of the most radical thinkers in Britain, people whose names were spoken with admiration in some circles and suspicion in others. Her father, William Godwin, believed society could be rebuilt through reason, education, and moral improvement. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, had written one of the most daring books of the age, arguing that women were not naturally inferior, merely denied education and independence. Mary never knew her mother. Wollstonecraft died just 10 days after giving birth, leaving behind a newborn daughter and a legacy that would loom over Mary's entire life. From childhood onward, Mary grew up haunted by an absence she could never fill. She would later visit her mother's grave to read, write, and think, treating it as both shrine and classroom. Death was not an abstract concept in her early life. It was personal, immediate, and formative. Her father raised her surrounded by books, debates, and visiting intellectuals. The house was often filled with writers, philosophers, and political radicals, all arguing about revolution, justice, and the future of humanity. This was not a gentle or sheltered upbringing. Godwin believed children should be shaped by reason rather than discipline, but his ideals did not always translate into warmth. Mary was intellectually stimulated, but emotionally lonely, especially after her father remarried. Her stepmother favoured her own children, and Mary often felt like an outsider in her own home. Still, books became her refuge. She absorbed history, poetry, philosophy, and science at an early age, developing an imagination fueled by both knowledge and isolation. She learned early that ideas had consequences, that bold thinking could bring admiration, but also condemnation. This lesson would follow her throughout her life. From the very beginning, Mary Shelley stood at the intersection of creation and loss, brilliance and sorrow. She was born into a world of revolutionary thought, but also into a silence left by death. That tension, between intellectual ambition and emotional pain, would one day give birth to one of the most enduring stories ever written. By the time Mary Shelley reached her mid-teens, she was already restless. The world inside her father's house felt cramped, not physically but emotionally. Ideas flowed freely, but affection did not. It was during this vulnerable period that she met a man who seemed to embody everything she longed for: passion, rebellion, and poetic fire. His name was Percy Bysshe Shelley. Percy was already married when they met, which in early 19th century England was not a minor inconvenience, but a social landmine. He was known as a radical poet, an atheist, and a political troublemaker, exactly the sort of person respectable society warned young women to avoid. Naturally, Mary fell in love with him almost immediately. He treated her as an intellectual equal, encouraged her writing, and spoke of freedom with the intensity of someone determined to live by his ideals, no matter the cost. Their relationship quickly became a scandal. Mary's father, despite his radical philosophy, was horrified. He had written about free love in theory, but watching his teenage daughter run off with a married man was another matter entirely. Yet Mary was undeterred. In 1814, she and Percy fled England together, accompanied by Mary's stepsister, Claire Clairmont. It was less a romantic honeymoon, and more a chaotic act of rebellion. Their journey through France, Switzerland, and Germany was difficult, uncomfortable, and often miserable. They travelled on foot, slept poorly, ran out of money, and faced constant uncertainty. But for Mary, this escape was intoxicating. She had chosen love and freedom over obedience, fully aware that society would never forgive her for it. At just 16, she had severed her place in polite society with remarkable resolve. The emotional toll was heavy. Letters from home went unanswered. Friends turned cold. Respectable doors closed permanently. Yet Mary learned something crucial during this period. Independence came at a steep price, but submission cost even more. She was no longer simply the daughter of famous thinkers. She was now the author of her own scandal. This period of exile hardened her. Love, she discovered, was not a fairy tale, but a force capable of destruction, as well as inspiration. These lessons, about devotion, defiance, and consequence, would soon shape the darkest and most powerful ideas she ever put to paper. In 1816, Mary Shelley arrived in Switzerland expecting inspiration and beauty. What she encountered instead was darkness, literal and psychological. That year would later be remembered as the Year Without a Summer, caused by a massive volcanic eruption that filled the atmosphere with ash and blotted out the sun. Cold rain fell relentlessly. Skies stayed grey. Days felt unfinished. For Mary, the gloom seeped into everything. She and Percy Bysshe Shelley settled near Lake Geneva, not far from the rented villa of Lord Byron, already infamous for his excesses and genius. The group that gathered there, poets, lovers, and restless minds, spent their days trapped indoors, reading German ghost stories aloud by candlelight, arguing about science, life, and the soul. Conversations drifted toward electricity, galvanism, and the disturbing question of whether life itself could be artificially created. It was Byron who proposed a challenge. Each person should write a ghost story. At first, Mary struggled. Nights passed with no ideas, only unease. She felt like an observer rather than a creator, surrounded by towering male intellects. But her imagination was quietly assembling something far more powerful than a simple ghost tale. One night, unable to sleep, Mary experienced what she later described as a waking dream. She saw a pale student kneeling beside a thing he had assembled, watching it stir to life. The horror was not just in the creature, but in its maker, terrified by his own success. The image struck her with sudden clarity and became impossible to ignore. This was not a story about monsters in the traditional sense. It was about creation without responsibility, ambition without foresight, and the loneliness of being cast into the world unwanted. Mary drew unconsciously from everything she knew: her mother's death after childbirth, her father's cold idealism, her own experiences of abandonment and loss. Out of that sleepless night emerged the seed of Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. It was not born from comfort or joy, but from isolation, fear, and deep reflection on what it means to bring life into the world. That dark summer marked a turning point. Mary was no longer merely absorbing ideas. She was transforming them. In a world without sunlight, she imagined a spark powerful enough to animate the dead, and in doing so, quietly changed literature forever. The creation of Frankenstein did not bring immediate triumph to Mary Shelley. Instead, the years that followed were marked by a far more intimate and devastating education, motherhood, and the repeated experience of loss. While still in her late teens, Mary became pregnant for the first time. The child was born prematurely and lived only a few days. Mary recorded the event in her journal with quiet restraint, but the pain beneath her words was unmistakable. She dreamed of the baby coming back to life, warmed by the fire. It was a haunting image, and one that echoed eerily with the themes already forming in her imagination. More pregnancies followed, and with them more tragedy. Of Mary's children, only one would survive into adulthood. Each loss deepened her understanding of grief, responsibility, and the cruel randomness of existence. These were not abstract ideas to her. They were lived realities. While Percy Shelley pursued poetry and ideals with relentless energy, Mary was often left to bear the physical and emotional consequences of their shared life. The contrast between creation and destruction became inescapable. To give life was to risk unbearable pain. To love deeply was to invite devastation. These experiences sharpened the emotional core of Frankenstein, transforming it from a clever philosophical experiment into something far more human. The creature's abandonment, its longing for connection, and its rage at being rejected all carried the weight of Mary's personal losses. During this period, Mary also faced social isolation. She was judged harshly for her unconventional life, blamed for moral transgressions others freely committed. Respectable society saw her as reckless, improper, even dangerous. Yet she continued to write, revise, and think, often doing so while exhausted, grieving, and financially uncertain. In 1818, Frankenstein was finally published, anonymously. Many readers assumed the author was a man. Some critics praised the novel's originality while condemning its disturbing ideas. Others were unsettled by the fact that such a dark and philosophical work could have come from someone so young. Mary watched quietly as her creation entered the world, much like the creature in her novel, misunderstood, debated, and judged without mercy. Motherhood and grief had carved something permanent into Mary Shelley. They stripped away youthful illusions and replaced them with a deeper, darker clarity. Life, she learned, was fragile, creation was dangerous, and love carried consequences no one could fully control. As Frankenstein began to circulate and stir conversation, Mary Shelley found that recognition did not translate into security. The novel attracted attention, controversy, and curiosity, but very little money. Most of the profits went to publishers, while Mary and her husband continued to live under constant financial strain. Fame, it turned out, was not a reliable source of food, warmth, or stability. In 1816, after years of scandal and uncertainty, Mary finally married Percy Bysshe Shelley. The marriage was made possible by tragedy. Percy's first wife had drowned herself, a death that cast a long shadow over their union. Though the marriage brought a degree of social legitimacy, it did little to ease their deeper problems. Percy remained brilliant, idealistic, and increasingly impractical. Money slipped through his hands almost as quickly as it arrived. He gave generously to friends, causes, and strangers, while Mary worried quietly about debts, children, and survival. Their relationship grew strained. Percy's emotional intensity could be exhausting, and his belief in free love often left Mary feeling insecure and sidelined. She admired his genius, but she also carried the burden of reality, arranging moves, managing finances, and enduring the consequences of his recklessness. While he wrote poetry aimed at eternity, Mary was forced to think about tomorrow. Despite this, she did not stop writing. She revised Frankenstein, contributed essays and reviews, and began work on new fiction. Yet her literary identity remained overshadowed by her husband's reputation. She was often introduced not as an author in her own right, but as Percy Shelley's wife, a label that quietly minimized her achievements. Poverty followed them wherever they went. They moved frequently, fleeing creditors and searching for cheaper living conditions. This instability deepened Mary's sense of displacement. Home was never permanent, and safety always felt provisional. Still, these years refined her voice. She became sharper, more disciplined, and more aware of the cost of idealism when divorced from responsibility. This period forced Mary Shelley to confront a harsh truth. Imagination alone could not sustain a life. Creation required endurance. Genius demanded sacrifice. And love, no matter how passionate, could erode under the weight of hunger, grief, and unmet expectations. The tension between vision and survival would remain a central theme in both her life and her work. By the early 1820s, Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley left England for Italy, hoping distance might solve what proximity had failed to fix. Italy promised beauty, warmth, and a lower cost of living. It also offered escape from creditors, judgment, and the ghosts of their earlier choices. For a time, the move felt almost successful. The landscapes were luminous, the cities ancient and alive, and the intellectual circles stimulating. Yet beneath the surface, the same fractures remained. Italy became a place of contrasts. There were moments of genuine happiness, long walks, shared reading, conversations about art and history. But these were punctured repeatedly by tragedy. 2 of Mary's children died there, taken by illness in quick succession. The losses hollowed her. Grief became routine, something endured rather than processed. Percy, overwhelmed and guilt-ridden, retreated further into idealism, poetry, and emotional distance. Their marriage began to feel less like a partnership and more like coexistence. Percy's belief in emotional freedom led him into intense attachments with other women, arrangements he justified philosophically, but which wounded Mary deeply. She was expected to be understanding, enlightened, modern, yet she remained human. Love, she learned again, could be rationalized into cruelty. Mary continued writing, though often in emotional isolation. She worked on novels such as Valperga, drawing on Italian history and political struggle, but the public reception was lukewarm. Critics compared her unfavorably to her husband, dismissing her work as secondary, derivative, or overly intellectual for a woman. The irony was sharp. She was criticized both for thinking too much and for not being brilliant enough. Italy, once imagined as renewal, slowly became associated with loss. The sunlit landscapes could not soften the accumulating grief. Each death, each disappointment, stripped away another layer of youthful optimism. Mary matured rapidly, not through choice but necessity. Still, something crucial was forming. These years sharpened her understanding of endurance. She saw how ideals collapsed under pressure, how beauty could coexist with suffering, and how individuals survived not through grand philosophies, but through quiet persistence. Italy did not save Mary Shelley, but it forged her. Out of heat, grief, and disillusionment, she emerged with a clearer sense of herself, not as someone orbiting genius, but as a writer shaped by experience, restraint, and a deep knowledge of human fragility. In 1822, everything collapsed. Mary Shelley was only 24 when her life was violently split in two. Her husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, set sail along the Italian coast in a small boat, confident as ever in his belief that nature could be mastered with courage and intellect. A sudden storm rose without warning. The boat vanished. Days later, Percy's body washed ashore,